Novel Navigator. Chapter 11, by Chong. I am not wrong. That's anonymous sword art from Sword Marquee Mansion. The middle-aged man in a purple robe was astonished and couldn't help recalling the movements Jian Wushuang had demonstrated earlier. His movements were too fast. Though Jian Wushuang's strength was too weak to be a threat, he might not be able to fend off such an attack if it was made by someone on par with him. It was not his first time witnessing such terrifying swordsmanship. More than a decade ago, a powerful enemy had attacked the Sword Marquee Mansion and defeated many of its warriors. The Sword Pavilion Master, Jian Nantian, was the only exception. He alone killed the enemy, using precisely the sword art. Anonymous sword art. The supreme sword art of Sword Marquee Mansion. It existed only in legends even within Sword Marquee Mansion. Anonymous sword art was simply too profound and mysterious, such that few could use it even after decades of intensive study, much less master it. Furthermore, this sword art was a non-inheritable top secret in Sword Pavilion. Only Sword Pavilion masters had access to study it, with only 3 of them in history being able to use it. The 18 first-class sword arts of Sword Pavilion may be mighty and extraordinary, but they were nothing compared to the legendary anonymous sword art. This young man actually managed to use the anonymous sword art. Though it was only the first move, it's nevertheless incredible. The middle-aged man in a purple robe stared at Jian Wushuang. The one he used before was the fallen leaf sword art. He has already reached great heights. As for anonymous sword art, it is the lifeblood of Sword Pavilion. Ordinary people completely don't have the chance to learn it. He's so young and only at the 4th step of the spirit path, but he's already capable of using so many sword arts of Sword Pavilion. He can even use the legendary anonymous sword art. He must be. The middle-aged man seemed to have already guessed Jian Wushuang's identity and the corners of his mouth lifted. Interesting. Following the end of the life-or-death battle. Mr. Nan, here are your prizes. The black-robed servant of Gladiator Arena handed Jian Wushuang a wooden box. When he opened it, he saw 11 fragrant ivory pills lying inside, including the one that originally belonged to him. The odds of the life-or-death battle between warriors of the Gladiator Arena within the same rank was 1-to-1, but the rank-skipping challenge was 10-to-1. That was why he chose it. The greater the risk, the better the harvest. Jian Wushuang examined the wooden box thoroughly. When he was satisfied, he nodded and was ready to leave. The black-robed servant stopped him. Mr. Nan, please wait for a moment. Is there anything else? Jian Wushuang asked, eyes narrowed. The Gladiator Arena had an exceedingly strong status in the entire Tianzong dynasty and enjoyed great prestige. Though he didn't worry about what they would do to him just for a mere 11 first-class spirit-cultivating pills, he kept his guard up. Our supervisor watched your duel against Spear Devil and became interested in you, so he'd like to meet you, the black-robed servant said. Oh? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. Just then, the middle-aged man in a loose purple robe, flanked by a couple of golden-robed servants, entered slowly. Ha ha. Mr. Nan, isn't it? I'm Supervisor Bai Chong of the Gladiator Arena. You can call me Sir Bai Chong, the man said in a clear and bright voice. Surprised, Jian Wushuang immediately bowed. Sir Bai Chong. This man's status was nearly on par with the Sword Marquee Mansion Master, perhaps higher. Jian Wushuang had to show reverence. You can leave now, Bai Chong told the black-robed servant, waving a hand. The servant bowed and excused himself. Mr. Nan, I suppose the swordsmanship you used to kill Spear Devil is the anonymous sword art of Sword Pavilion? Bai Chong smiled faintly at Jian Wushuang and said, as far as I know, that's the top secret of Sword Pavilion that only successive Sword Pavilion masters are allowed to study. Now, the only person in the entire Sword Pavilion who can possibly understand it is Jian Wushuang, the son of the missing master, Jian Nantian. He's the only one who has a chance of learning the anonymous sword art due to their relationship. So I'm wondering if you have anything to do with Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang's heart thumped, eyes revealing a hint of panic. Obviously, Bai Chong was already aware of his identity. I was discovered even though I only fought once. Jian Wushuang sighed helplessly. Truthfully, he had inherited the anonymous sword art from his father. This sword art was indeed the top sword art of Sword Pavilion. He had hidden it so well all this while that not even Jian Menger was aware of it. And he had chosen the rank-skipping challenge to get all the first-class spirit-cultivating pills he needed in one go because he was worried someone would recognize him if he showed up too much in the gladiator arena. Participating in one battle lowered those chances. Yet he was forced to use his strongest skill, anonymous sword art, against Spear Devil. He didn't expect a sharp-eyed man to be watching him among the crowd. I'm just kidding. Noticing the surprise in Jian Wushuang's eyes, Bai Chong immediately understood the situation and faked a laugh. From the looks of it, you seem to urgently need first-class spirit-cultivating pills. Is that right, Mr. Nan? Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded. Well, these first-class spirit-cultivating pills are beneficial to spirit path warriors, but they require a long time to be absorbed. You may have 11 first-class spirit-cultivating pills now, but you'll need at least a year to take in all of them, Bai Chong said. You're right. Jian Wushuang nodded but was disagreeing with him internally. It was true that other people would need at least a year to take in 11 first-class spirit-cultivating pills. But he was different. He was a deviant cultivator who cultivated the heavenly creation skill. Thanks to the amazing power of the heavenly creation skill, he could absorb these first-class spirit-cultivating pills very quickly. It wouldn't even take him a month to absorb all of them. It's too time-consuming to absorb all these first-class spirit-cultivating pills. If you want to boost your strength in a short amount of time, it doesn't seem realistic to merely rely on them, Bai Chong said. Sir Bai Chong, what are you trying to say? Jian Wushuang asked, frowning. Bai Chong smiled at him. Mr. Nan, have you heard of primordial spiritual liquid? Chapter 12, The Sixth Heaven of Divine Path. Primordial spiritual liquid? Jian Wushuang was startled because he had heard about such spiritual liquid, which was formed by heaven and earth spiritual energy. As it contained extremely refined spiritual power, it was better at promoting a warrior's cultivation compared to spirit-cultivating pills. However, its formation required very rare conditions, making it extremely valuable. Additionally, the demand for primordial spiritual liquid was extraordinarily high. Even warriors in the spirit path realm tried to cultivate with the aid of primordial spiritual liquid. Therefore, there were few warriors who were able to use primordial spiritual liquid in the entire Tianzong dynasty, let alone those in Sword Marquee Mansion. Although there was some primordial spiritual liquid in Sword Marquee Mansion, the effect on their warriors was insignificant due to the small amount. I know a place where there is a pond formed completely out of primordial spiritual liquid. Are you interested? Bai Chong gave Jian Wushuang a smile. A pond? Jian Wushuang was intrigued by this. A meager amount of primordial spiritual liquid would have little effect on promoting a warrior's cultivation, while an abundance of it would play a totally different role. A pond formed out of primordial spiritual liquid? How much was primordial spiritual liquid there? It's in a cave of a rift in the northern part of Nine Wolves Mountain, which is 15 kilometers away from the commandery city. But for a long time, it's been occupied by a bloody lion at the peak of rank 6. If you want to enter the cave, it is necessary to get rid of the bloody lion, Bai Chong said with a smile. A rift in the north. Nine Wolves Mountain. Jian Wushuang secretly bore it in mind and replied gratefully, "Thank you, Sir Bai Chong." "Please, you are welcome." Bai Chong waved at him. Jian Wushuang looked deep in his eyes and then turned away. After Jian Wushuang had gone, a golden-robed servant behind Bai Chong could not help saying, "Supervisor, that pond is formed completely out of primordial spiritual liquid. With such abundant primordial spiritual liquid, its value is very high. The pond is so precious, not because of the primordial spiritual liquid, but the spiritual fruit at the bottom of the pond. The primordial spiritual liquid was formed due to the spiritual fruit. Bai Chong shook his head and laughed. Tell those people who go to the pond to only take the spiritual fruit away. Just ignore the primordial spiritual liquid and bloody lion. Got it? The golden-robed servant nodded. In the gladiator arena, the supervisor was so powerful that no one dared to violate his orders. By the way, will the annual Sword Marquee token battle be held next month? Bai Chong again asked. Yes, the golden-robed servant replied respectfully. Supervisor, you've been invited to the Sword Marquee mansion. Moreover, the new Sword Pavilion Master will officially take office. I heard that the new Sword Pavilion Master is Jian Wushuang, the most gifted youth in Sword Marquee Mansion, who is less than 16 years old but has already reached the profound spiritual sea realm. She is also the daughter of Jian Lan, the great elder of Red Martial Hall. Oh! Bai Chong unfurrowed his brows. Haha, it seems that the Sword Marquee token battle will be very interesting this year. Now I am looking forward to it. The son of Jian Nantian. Tut tut, I want to see if he will surprise me as his father did. On the way back to Sword Marquee Mansion, Jian Wushuang kept thinking. The pond is formed completely out of primordial spiritual liquid, so it would be extremely valuable. Why did he tell me this information? It must be because of my father. Jian Wushuang guessed with some certainty. His father had told him that, due to his aloofness and pride, he had few friends. But, Bai Chong was one of them. Obviously, Bai Chong recognized me and, as a friend of my father, he chose to tell me that. Whether he told me for the sake of my father or not, I am grateful for his kindness, Jian Wushuang thought secretly. In a pond that is formed completely out of primordial spiritual liquid, even average people would greatly benefit if they cultivated there, let alone I, who cultivates the heavenly creation skill. However, there is a bloody lion at the peak of rank 6, which is comparable to the peak of the 6th step of the spirit path for humans. Presently, I am not capable of fighting against it. Take it slow. I need to enhance my abilities first. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands firmly. In the earth-level cultivating room of Sword Pavilion. First-class spirit cultivating pills have amazing efficacy. Previously, I broke through the 4th heaven of the divine path from the 3rd heaven of the divine path after swallowing just one pill. Now, I have 11 first-class spirit cultivating pills. I really wonder to what extent my strength will reach after absorbing all 11 first-class spirit cultivating pills. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged on the futon, with fervent eyes. I am ready. Without hesitation, Jian Wushuang opened the jade box and took one first-class spirit cultivating pill. After he took this elixir, heavenly creation skill functioned to quickly absorb that amazing energy. In the following days, Jian Wushuang still carried out his earnest cultivation. When compared to other skills, it took less time to cultivate heavenly creation skill. Furthermore, the cultivation speed increased due to its ability of rapid recovery and the assisting effects of the earth-level cultivating room. Meanwhile, Jian Wushuang freely ingested those first-class spirit cultivating pills, which countless cultivators of the spirit path coveted. All of that accelerated his cultivation to an incredible level. In the blink of an eye, half a month passed by. There was now only 1 month until the annual Sword Marquee token battle. That night, it showered. Jian Wushuang, who had continued to stay overnight inside the earth-level cultivating room, completely absorbed the efficacy of those pills inside his body. He then slowly opened his eyes, and there was a dormant, rumbling spiritual power within his body. As he abruptly clenched his hands, an explosive force erupted volcanically, as if a punch could cause the air to explode. Jian Wushuang's eyes were sparkling with a dazzling light. The sixth heaven of the divine path. Almost reaching the peak of the sixth heaven. Jian Wushuang was ecstatic. With his desperate cultivation over half a month, he had completely absorbed the energy from the 11 first-class spirit cultivating pills. After all, the efficacy of a first-class spirit cultivating pill was amazing. For average warriors, it took at least 1 month to thoroughly absorb one pill. However, he had absorbed 11 pills in a very short time, by virtue of the heavenly creation skill. As a result, his strength increased by leaps and bounds. It was a long way from the fourth heaven of the divine path to the sixth heaven of the divine path, almost to the peak of the sixth heaven of the divine path. Many people would have been startled had they known that he had cultivated at such an unbelievable speed. Because only 1 month ago, they knew that he was trash who could not condense spiritual power. You just wait and see, Jian Menger. I will startle you in 1 month. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands firmly, with an undiluted self-confidence in his eyes. Chapter 13, Trial Tower. Jian Wushuang walked out of the cultivating room and saw Elder Hong waiting outside. Seeing Jian Wushuang, Elder Hong could not refrain from showing astonishment. He felt that Jian Wushuang had changed a lot in terms of his strength. Jian Wushuang did not voluntarily release his aura of spiritual power, so Elder Hong could not figure out his exact cultivation. However, he knew that Jian Wushuang must have made great progress in the cultivation room. It seems that our young pavilion master has made big strides lately, Elder Hong said, smiling. Yeah. Jian Wushuang nodded and asked, Elder Hong, what's the matter? Here's the thing, Elder Hong replied. The trial tower has opened again today. If you want to join the fight, you should try. Trial tower? Jian Wushuang was intrigued by this information. Trial tower was a 7-story building made for testing cultivation and martial arts techniques. The higher the floor, the more difficult the test. It was usually closed, except for the month before the year-end battle each year. The trial tower test could be regarded as a preliminary battle. After all, the annual Sword Marquee Token Battle was the most significant event in Sword Marquee Mansion. Every year, the mansion would invite influential masters from within the Bashui prefecture. To ensure a good performance for the masters, the participating disciples had to pass the trial tower in advance. At a minimum, only disciples who had reached the 5th story, of the 7-story tower, were qualified to participate in the battle. Therefore, Jian Wushuang had to pass this test in the trial tower if he wanted to participate in the battle. I am leaving for Nine Wolves Mountain soon, and I will stay there for 1 month. Since I have to get the entry qualification for the battle, I have to take this chance at the trial tower and pass the test first. Jian Wushuang thought to himself. It would be a piece of cake for him to pass the trial tower test. Once he made up his mind, Jian Wushuang went directly to the trial tower. Trial tower stood erect in the very center of a huge courtyard. It was a gigantic tower, more than 33 meters high. At that moment, there were a lot of disciples in front of the huge tower. Look, the 6th gem has been lit. Cousin Jianlin has passed the 6th story. Cousin Jianlin is really awesome. How would you know? Cousin Jianlin broke through the 6th step of the spirit path long ago. He has reached the peak of the 6th step. With his cultivation of spiritual power, it's a cinch for him to pass the 7th story, never mind the 6th story. Look, the 7th gem has already been lit. Several disciples stared at the 7 gems in front of the tower gate. Each gem corresponded to 1 story of the trial tower. After passing 1 story, a gem would be lit up. If all 7 gems were lit up, it meant that all 7 stories had been passed. It must have been that Jianlin, who had reached the peak of the 6th step of the spirit path, was going to pass all 7 stories. Soon after, the tower gate opened once again. The cyan-clothed Jianlin walked out slowly, with a confident smile. Noticing the envious glances from the surrounding disciples, he was extremely proud of himself. Jian has passed the 7th story. He is qualified to participate in the sword marquee token battle. In front of the tower gate, an elder from Red Martial Hall wrote his name down rapidly, and then looked around, saying next. Many disciples hesitated. It was hard to pass the trial tower test. If one wanted to pass the 5th story, he needed to have a spiritual power cultivation of the 5th step of spirit path. Moreover, if they wanted to take part in the battle, he had to be under 16. In the mansion, the number of disciples who could satisfy these two conditions was only modest. With so few qualifiers and so many bystanders, one would feel embarrassed if they took the test but then failed to even pass the 5th story. Let me have a try. As a voice rose, a young figure slowly came over. He had a long sword behind his back. Many disciples looked at him. They were astonished when they recognized him. Is it him? Jian Wushuang? Jian Wushuang of the Sword Pavilion, was he the one who just spoke? How could he possibly pass the trial tower test? Everyone was in disbelief. As the son of the last Sword Pavilion master, Jian Wushuang had a special identity. Furthermore, he was universally recognized as trash in the mansion, because he had not been able to gather spiritual power. Therefore, all the disciples in the mansion knew him. For this reason, they were extremely skeptical when he decided to attempt the test of the trial tower. In addition to the disciples, the note-keeping elder of Red Martial Hall could not help raising his head with surprise in his eyes, asking, "You want to take the test in trial tower? Can't I?" Jian Wushuang looked indifferent. Of course, you can. As long as you are a disciple of the mansion under 16. The elder nodded, saying, "Please go in." Thank you. Jian Wushuang went directly into the tower, ignoring the multitude of eyes upon him. Just as he ascended the steps, a voice that was obviously unfriendly rose from the side. "Jian Wushuang, how dare you come here to take the test? You overestimate yourself." Jian Wushuang paused and glanced coldly at Jian, who glared at him with contempt. Without a word, he continued to walk toward the trial tower. Soon, he was inside the tower. When he saw this, Jian slightly turned the corner of his lips. "Humph. Trash like you is so arrogant. Wait and see, you will be embarrassed later." "Cousin Jian, do you think Jian Wushuang can pass the 5th story?" a disciple of Red Martial Hall asked. "Him." Jian responded with a sneer, "To pass the 5th story one must have a cultivation of the 5th step of spirit path. He reached the 3rd step of spirit path more than half a month ago. Now, he might have reached the 4th step of spirit path at most. Even if he is the son of the last Sword Pavilion master and possesses outstanding swordsmanship, it is still idiotic nonsense for him to pass the 5th story with a cultivation of the 4th step of the spirit path." The surrounding people all agreed with him. More than half a month ago, he had just reached the 3rd step of the spirit path. How strong could he be now? He might have reached the 4th step of the spirit path at most. How could he possibly pass the 5th story in the trial tower? What a joke. Humph, he is asking for grief. Jian sneered. He expected that Jian Wushuang would disgrace himself in front of everyone. Chapter 14, Fighting in Trial Tower. On the first floor of Trial Tower. Looking at those 3 tall figures standing in front of him, Jian Wushuang knew they were humanoid puppets, which were unique to Trial Tower. They were opponents that he needed to confront. Trial Tower, a place where cultivation and martial arts techniques are assessed. In general, anyone whose cultivation reaches the 6th step will complete 7 levels in total. Even those who have outstanding martial arts techniques at the peak of the 5th step may get to the 7th level as well. Therefore, I am curious about how far I can go using only my swordsmanship and not using any spiritual power. Jian Wushuang thought secretly. I am ready. After saying that, Jian Wushuang waved the long sword in his hand. Wow! Instantly, condensed sword essence directly erupted like roaring waves. Sword tide! Jian Wushuang yelled with wildness in his eyes. Sword tide was a deadly move from a first-class sword art, ceaseless waterflow sword art. And it was wielded at its best by Jian Wushuang. After some simple movements, a sword shadow swept over the room. Those three humanoid puppets instantly fought back. However, being at the entrance level, they were much weaker than Jian Wushuang. Even if Jian Wushuang did not use his spiritual power, he could defeat them easily with only his quick and forceful swordsmanship. The first level passed. Outside Trial Tower, the first gem lit up, which meant that he made it through the first level. The disciples around it did not feel surprised. Humph! Only the first level. With his cultivation in the third step of Spirit Path, he should easily pass through the first 3 floors. And completing the 4th level is also possible. However, it is an idiot's daydream to think that he will complete the 5th level. Jian Lin's face was still full of contempt. Not long after the first gem had lit up, the second one lit up and, soon after, the third one followed. All intervals were short, which meant that it did not take Jian Wushuang too much time to defeat those humanoid puppets on each floor. However, it was only after a long interval that the 4th one lit up. He stayed on the 4th floor for a long time, so he obviously spent a lot of time battling hard with the humanoid puppets there. As for the 5th floor, the humanoid puppets are much stronger than the ones downstairs. There is no chance for him to win. The 4th level must be his limit. Haha, I knew it. Trash like him, how can he pass through the 5th level of Trial Tower? Many disciples around sneered and booed. They thought Jian Wushuang had given his all to make it through the 4th level. Otherwise, why would he have been held up for such a long time? Jian Lin especially sneered again and again, smiling sardonically, and could not wait to make fun of Jian Wushuang when he walked out of Trial Tower. On the 5th floor of Trial Tower, Jian Wushuang's face appeared was grim. After each level, the strength of the humanoid puppets greatly increase. I easily completed the first 3 levels with swordsmanship only. However, on the 4th level, I went through a tough battle and it took a long time to defeat them. Therefore, on the 5th floor, it will be impossible to defeat them with swordsmanship alone. Let me use spiritual power. Jian Wushuang stretched the sides of his mouth upward, then spiritual power burst forth in a flash. If disciples outside Trial Tower knew that Jian Wushuang completed the first 4 levels with only his swordsmanship, it would have scared the pants off of them. In general, a warrior who wanted to pass the 4th level of Trial Tower at least needed to be in the 4th step of the Spirit Path. However, he had gotten through it without using spiritual power. In other words, his martial arts technique was well matched with cultivation of warriors in the 4th step of the Spirit Path. It was incredible. Once his spiritual power, which was nearly at the peak of the 6th heaven of divine path, burst out, it was much easier for Jian Wushuang to fight against those humanoid puppets. The disciples outside Trial Tower, including Jian Lin, were waiting to see how Jian Wushuang would bring shame upon himself. But, just then, the 5th gem by the door of Trial Tower lit up. Upon seeing that, the disciples were suddenly astonished. It meant that Jian Wushuang had gotten through the 5th level. How could this be? Impossible. He took such a long time on the 4th level. Clearly, he completed that with great difficulty. So, how could he get through the 5th level? Does this mean that Trash has reached the 5th step of the Spirit Path in his cultivation? All of their faces were full of disbelief and astonishment. Jian Lin was even more astonished with a wide open mouth but did not know what to say. However, that was just the beginning. Before they could react, the 6th gem lit up. The 6th level. Having seen that, all of the disciples who were gathered there held their breath for a second. Then, after less than 15 minutes, the last one also lit up instantly. All 7 gems, each embodying one floor of Trial Tower, had lit up. It meant that Jian Wushuang had completed all of them. Silence. Outside was deathly silent. All the people on site looked at those 7 sparkling gems in disbelief. They had never been in such a state of shock before. The 7th level, he made it through the 7th level? Jianlin was dumbstruck. Actually, he swore that Jian Wushuang was, at most, only at the 4th step of the spirit path before he had gone into Trial Tower. To scrape by the 4th level was lucky for him. There was no chance for him to make it through the 5th level. But what was the reality? The 5th level? Jian Wushuang had not only passed through the 5th floor, but he also passed through the 6th and the 7th. He had passed through all 7 floors of Trial Tower. Now, he was as strong as him. Impossible. This is by no means possible. Jianlin shook his head fiercely. He could never believe that this had happened. While all of them were in shock, they did not notice that Jian Wushuang had walked out of the Trial Tower door. Shua. In a flash, all eyes turned toward him, making him the focal point on the field. Even the elder from Red Martial Hall who was in charge of recording the results was now staring at Jian Wushuang in utter surprise. Am I qualified to enter the Sword Marquee token battle in 1 month? Jian Wushuang looked at the elder and asked. The elder was startled for a second. Then he returned to himself, nodded, and said, Jian Wushuang has completed the 7th level. Qualified. Jian Wushuang nodded with satisfaction. However, the people around him burst into a heated discussion. The 7th level. How could it be possible? How could Jian Wushuang get past the 7th floor? It generally requires a warrior whose cultivation reaches the 6th step of spirit path to complete it. However, Jian Wushuang he could not condense any spiritual power just 1 month ago, could he? No. No. His cultivation could not be that strong. His swordsmanship must have been what helped him. Yes. That is right. I will never believe that a person without any spiritual power could reach the 6th step of spirit path in just 1 month. Many disciples were denigrating him. Jian Wushuang. A somber voice called out. Before he could react, a figure stood in front of Jian Wushuang. It was Jianlin. He was so angry that his face was twisted. Chapter 15, Fight. Jianlin stared at Jian Wushuang coldly, while the latter looked at him indifferently. Jian Wushuang, it seems that I have always looked down upon you. I never expected that you had hidden yourself so deeply. Everyone thought you were trash who could not condense any spiritual power. But now it appears you could condense spiritual power long ago, and your cultivation is not bad. You have just hidden your power and were unwilling to expose it. Jianlin's voice was as cold as a knife. About half a month ago, you exposed your cultivation at the 3rd step of spirit path in front of me. You faked that, didn't you? Pretend? Does he think I hid my strength for 4 years? Jian Wushuang sneered inwardly but did not give an answer. Jianlin and the surrounding disciples could think what they liked. It didn't matter if they thought he had hidden his strength all this time or something similar. He did not mind at all. In the Sword Marquee mansion, what he really cared about was one person, Jian Meng'er. Jian Wushuang's indifference, even disregard, made Jianlin even angrier. Jian Wushuang, I have passed the 7th level of the Trial Tower before. Now you have made it too, so do you dare to fight with me? Jianlin said directly. Fight with you in public. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and looked at him. What? You don't dare. The corner of Jianlin's mouth turned up slightly, with a hint of disdain. Jianlin, I am very curious. There are many disciples in the Sword Marquee mansion. Why do you always target me? If you envy me because of Jian Meng'er, well, now I am done with her. Why do you still bother me? Is your mind so narrow? Jian Wushuang asked with disdain. His guess was correct. Jian Lin was narrow-minded, and he was filled with jealousy. As Jian Wushuang had spent so much time with Jian Menger in the past, this caused Jian Lin's resentment toward him to reach its limit. Even though the relationship between them was now over, his resentment hadn't faded at all. Enough talk. I am just asking whether you dare to fight me. Jian Lin stared at Jian Wushuang firmly. Hearing these words, Jian Wushuang's mouth tilted slightly. He took a deep breath and raised his head again. His eyes flashed with a hint of relief. Well, I promise you, if you want to fight, then we will fight. There was a stir throughout the whole trial tower. Accepted the challenge. He accepted the challenge. How dare he accept it? Why wouldn't he? After all, he has passed the 7th level of the trial tower. Maybe his cultivation of spiritual power has reached the 6th step, too. Wait. They both passed the 7th level of the trial tower. Brother Jian Lin's cultivation reached the peak of the 6th step long ago. Obviously, Jian Wushuang has been hiding his cultivation level this whole time. Their fight will be very interesting. Disciples surrounding them, looking forward to the fight. You have got guts. Jian Lin grinned hideously, but he didn't look Jian Wushuang in the eye at all. Even if he had passed the 7th level of the trial tower, it would not make any difference. Everyone knew that any disciple whose cultivation had reached the 6th step could pass the 7th level easily. As for him, he had reached the peak of the 6th step long ago. Take this. Jian Lin roared loudly and stamped his foot. He was so powerful that a crack appeared in the floor and boundless spiritual power poured out like a flood. Using his spiritual power, his right hand was clenched into a fist. Immediately he threw a punch with vast power, raising a fierce wind around him. His cultivation at the peak of the 6th step of the spirit path burst out instantly. Many disciples present kept their eyes open. Although the fist was not aimed at them, they still could feel its tremendous force. Facing the full outburst of Jian Lin's power, Jian Wushuang kept his eyes cold and sharp. His spiritual power poured out slowly. The 6th step. It really is the 6th step. As soon as Jian Wushuang's spiritual power was revealed, many disciples around him knew his true cultivation immediately. Although they were both at the 6th step, there were some differences. Get out of my way. An angry roar sounded out like a thunderbolt. Jian Wushuang struck with all his power. Ha ha, you dare fight me without drawing your sword. How stupid. Jian Lin could not help laughing. Everyone knew that Jian Lin was at the peak of the 6th step of the spirit path. Watching Jian Wushuang's reaction, it was obvious that he was uncertain if he could battle this level. Under the circumstances, he would be at an absolute disadvantage if he confronted Jian Lin directly. Bang! Two spiritual power fists finally crashed together. The two fists containing hidden power exploded out at the same time. What? When Jian Lin's fist slammed into Jian Wushuang's, his face changed, because he felt the frightening power from Jian Wushuang's fist. This power was apparently stronger than his. How is this possible? He hasn't reached the peak of the 6th step. Jian Lin roared in his heart. With a heart filled with astonishment and anger, Jian Lin felt a burst of sharp pain. He groaned slightly, and blood spilled from his mouth. He retreated back 10 steps, and every step was so heavy and forceful that he left deep tracks on the floor. However, Jian Wushuang did not retreat even one step. Outclassed. Jian Wushuang totally surpassed Jian Lin in power. This. Many disciples were shocked. No one had thought the competition in pure force would turn out like this. One who obviously had not reached the peak of the 6th step should not have outclassed Jian Lin, who was at the peak of the same realm. However, they did not know that Jian Wushuang cultivated the heavenly creation skill. It defied the natural order, and the spiritual power warriors could release was much stronger than warriors following other forms of cultivations. Although Jian Wushuang had not reached the peak of the sixth heaven of divine path, the spiritual power he was capable of unleashing was stronger than other warriors at the peak of the sixth step of the spirit path. In this competition, totally focused on strength, Jian Wushuang completely outclassed Jian Lin. I cannot believe it. A flash of insanity appeared in Jian Lin's eyes. He was repelled by Jian Wushuang. He groaned and then rushed toward Jian Wushuang. He stretched out his right hand. A tiger's roar erupted suddenly between heaven and earth. Then, a giant tiger began to gradually form from the convergence of his power. After completely materializing, the giant tiger charged at Jian Wushuang like lightning. Its tiger-roaring fist. Brother Jian Lin is using a martial arts technique and he is using his most powerful one. That giant tiger was totally condensed by spiritual power. This movement costs vast spiritual power, but it is really strong. Look, Jian Wushuang is drawing his sword. The movement of the sword. Chuu. The cold sword light was shining, and then it vanished immediately. Time seemed to stop completely for a moment. In front of the shocked audience, the aggressive giant tiger was split into two. Ja. The sound of a sword edge piercing into the body rang out. A smear of blood splashed across Jian Lin's shoulder. Chapter 16, So What? Outside the trial tower, all was silent. No sound was heard except for the subtle sound of Jian Wushuang's long sword sliding back into its sheath. Ignoring the great shock in the eyes all around him, Jian Wushuang slowly turned away to leave. But before going, he stopped to glance at Jian Lin and said coldly, "This time I only chopped into your shoulder. But if there is a next time, I will chop off your head." Hearing this, Jian Lin was shocked and humiliated, feeling ashamed and resentful. And the disciples of Marquis Mansion did not recover from their surprise until Jian Wushuang had completely disappeared from their sight. Then, everyone present could not stop talking about what had happened. Brother Jian Lin was defeated. How could this happen? One move. Only one move. There is quite a big disparity in strength. Not only in their spiritual powers, but the disparity between their martial arts techniques is even greater. And it was. Jian Wushuang surpassed Jian Lin in explosive spiritual power. And as for martial arts technique, it should be known that Jian Meng'er, whose attainments in swordsmanship were marvelous, was regarded as the first genius in the sword Marquis Mansion. But her swordsmanship was taught to her by Jian Wushuang. Even Jian Meng'er herself knew that she was not qualified to compete with Jian Wushuang in martial arts technique. In the entire sword Marquis Mansion, it seemed that there was no one better than Jian Wushuang in martial arts technique. Because of the great disparity in their martial arts techniques, Jian Wushuang had defeated Jian Lin with only one move and had hurt his shoulder. If Jian Wushuang had wanted to, he could have killed Jian Lin just now. The news that Jian Wushuang had passed the 7th level of the trial tower and defeated Jian Lin with one move swept over Sword Marquis Mansion like a hurricane. Suddenly, the Sword Marquis Mansion was in total shock. Naturally, the news also came to Jian Meng'er at once. "Meng'er, something happened in the Marquis Mansion today." It was Jian Lan, the father of Jian Meng'er, who told her the news. Jian Wushuang had consolidated spiritual power and become a warrior. Moreover, his cultivation had reached the 6th step of the spirit path. Today, he passed the 7th level of the trial tower and defeated Jian Lin with only one move. Oh! Even Jian Meng'er felt quite astonished upon hearing that. Before our friendship broke up, he often said that he would be a real warrior soon. At that time, I thought he was just comforting himself. But now it seems that he wasn't. After being a little astonished, she slightly smiled and obviously did not take it seriously. "Meng'er, I'm afraid that you should attach some importance to this," Jian Lan said seriously. Though many people in the Marquis Mansion thought that Jian Wushuang had been concealing his strength, you and I know that there was indeed no spiritual power in his body just 1 month ago. During the last 4 years, Jian Meng'er was together with Jian Wushuang all the time. No one knew him better than they did. In only 1 month, he went from an ordinary man without any spiritual power to a warrior of the 6th step of the spirit path and defeated Jian Lin so easily. What terrifying progress he has made, Jian Lan said. So he has. Jian Meng'er nodded in agreement, but, so what? Jian Lan was stunned for a second. Father, you're worrying that he will be a powerful opponent in the battle next month, aren't you? Jian Meng'er asked. Jian Lan nodded. Jian Wushuang had taken a blood oath that he would compete against Jian Meng'er in the battle. That news spread throughout Sword Marquee Mansion. At first, none of them took it seriously. But now, they changed their minds. If Jian Wushuang defeated Jian Meng'er in front of all the people of Sword Marquee Mansion and the other strong experts present, she would fail to be the Sword Pavilion Master. Furthermore, she and her father would be laughed at by everyone. Jian Meng'er, universally acknowledged as the top genius in Sword Marquee Mansion, was completely surpassed by someone within 2 months. Was that not a big joke? Father, you worry too much. Jian Meng'er did not care about it at all and said, it's normal that Jian Wushuang could eventually consolidate spiritual power and make normal progress after practicing for 4 years. Although he could go from an ordinary man to reaching the 6th step of the spirit path within 1 month, he won't be able to reach the 7th step of the spirit path by next month. What do you think, Father? Reach the 7th step in 1 month. Jian Lan was stupefied for a moment and then shook his head firmly and resolutely. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. There is a great disparity between the 6th and 7th steps of the spirit path. Even a genius in cultivation like you spent a full half-year advancing from the 6th step to the 7th step of the spirit path. Moreover, you couldn't have succeeded without the assistance of lots of elixirs and some natural treasures, let alone an ordinary person. Therefore, no matter how fast Jian Wushuang cultivates, he can't reach the 7th step of the spirit path in 1 month. Jian Lan said resolutely and decisively. And indeed, that was true. A great disparity did exist between the 6th step of the spirit path and the 7th step of the spirit path. To make a breakthrough within 1 month was definitely wishful thinking. Yes, it's almost impossible. Besides, even if he did succeed, what could he do? Jian Meng'er said disdainfully. Hearing what Jian Meng'er had said, Jian Lan relaxed the frown on his face and then smiled. Indeed, regardless of whether or not Jian Wushuang could reach the 7th step of the spirit path in a month, he could do nothing even if he did make it. Presently, Jian Meng'er possessed cultivation at the profound spiritual sea realm. No matter how extraordinary Jian Wushuang was in swordsmanship, he could not compete with Jian Meng'er unless he was in the spiritual sea realm. Maybe I am overthinking this. Jian Wushuang can't threaten you. Jian Lan smiled in relief. Don't talk about him. Tell me about the master behind you. Is there any reply to the message? I have gotten a reply, Jian Meng'er answered with expectation. Great Master said that she would present herself at the battle in 1 month to witness me becoming the new Sword Pavilion Master. Haha, that's great. If she could present herself at the battle, you would no doubt be the winner. Hearing the good news, Jian Lan felt very delighted. In the Sword Pavilion, the 4 great elders, headed by Elder Hong, were gathered. Haha. Young Pavilion Master passed the 7th level and defeated Jian Lin with 1 move. That's awesome. It's amazing that the young Pavilion Master could have made such rapid progress in such a short period of time, isn't it? If the young Pavilion Master keeps improving at such a speed, he is likely to defeat Jian Meng'er in the battle next month. Having heard the good news, these elders were all talking and laughing. Elder brother, we concealed that matter from the young Pavilion Master because he was previously not even a warrior. But now, should we tell him about it? Another elder suddenly asked. No hurry, Elder Hong shook his head and said, it's too early. We should tell him a bit later. By the way, I'm going to write a letter and send it to the master in the Golden Dragon Palace. He will be glad to know that the young pavilion master has made such rapid progress. The whole Sword Marquis mansion was shocked by the battle between Jian Wushuang and Jian Lin. However, Jian Wushuang, the hero of the battle, did not care about it at all. After getting permission to join in the battle, he directly left for Nine Wolves Mountain. Jian Wushuang was very eager to get to the pond full of primordial spiritual liquid. Chapter 17, The Gastful Speed of Improvement. Nine Wolves Mountain was 15 kilometers away from the county and it took Jian Wushuang half a day to get there. He spent a long time trying to find the cave in the north rift of the mountain. It's that cave. Standing at the top of a big tree, Jian Wushuang could see a cave at the bottom of the rift. Not far from the cave was a huge monster, its breathing sounded rhythmically from its nose. Is that a bloody lion? Jian Wushuang stared at the huge monster, unable to look away. Bai Chong had mentioned that the cave with primordial spiritual liquid was the territory of a bloody lion at the peak of the sixth realm. A monster at the peak of that realm could match a warrior at the peak of the sixth step of spirit path. Some spirit beasts had innate advantages, so when they battled human beings, they were stronger. The spirit beasts are born to hate human beings, and their territorial awareness is extremely strong. If I want to get into that cave, I have no choice but to kill the bloody lion. So let's fight? Jian Wushuang's eyes were like lightning. Like an eagle preying on its food, he leapt down from the treetop. Long sword on his back was unsheathed at the same time. The sound of his sword echoed in the rift, as Jian Wushuang rushed violently towards the bloody lion. Bloody lion! Jian Wushuang's eyes were full of battle intent. Human being! Bloody lion woke up with a start and a pair of dark gold eyes burst out with cold killing intent. With an angry roar, it charged ferociously at Jian Wushuang. The battle surprisingly finished in just an instant. Jian Wushuang sheathed his bloody longsword and looked at bloody lion on the ground. Blood oozed from the deep sword scar in its neck. Many sword scars of different sizes were spread all over its body. It was dead now. According to convention, at the peak of the sixth realm, the bloody lion was powerful enough to defeat human beings at peak of the sixth step of the spirit path. However, this was only the case with normal human warriors. Once it encountered human warriors who mastered excellent martial arts techniques, not only could it not defeat them, it would be totally defeated by them. Jian Wushuang's swordsmanship could overwhelm the whole Sword Marquis mansion, so killing a bloody lion was rather easy. Ignoring the bloody lion's corpse, Jian Wushuang stepped into the cave. It was deep, and its path was very narrow. However, when he went through the small entranceway, he found it was quite different from the outside. The interior of the cave was quite refined. There was a stone table, bench, and bed. It appeared that someone had once lived here. As he entered further into the cave, he found that the pond emitted a faint scent. The diameter of the pond was 3 meters or less. It belonged to a small creature. However, as soon as Jian Wushuang noticed the pond, his eyes were full of wild excitement. Primordial spiritual liquid. Jian Wushuang looked at the fragrant, and nearly transparent, water in the pond eagerly. He could feel the pure power contained in the water. There was no doubt this pond water truly was the invaluable primordial spiritual liquid. The whole pond. Jian Wushuang jumped into the pond. The moment he entered the pond, he found that although it was not long in diameter, it was very deep, at least 10 meters. Such a large pond. All this water is primordial spiritual liquid. I wonder how much there is. Jian Wushuang thought in excitement. Primordial spiritual liquid was the purest spiritual liquid. It contained almost no impurities. For warriors following the spirit path, it was much stronger than spirit cultivating pills. Primordial spiritual liquid formed naturally, so very few people could use large quantities of it to improve their cultivation. But now there was a whole pond. If the water was divided into drops, how many would it be? What would the value be? No doubt it was very high. Sir Bai Chong has given me such an amazing opportunity. Trembling slightly with anticipation, Jian Wushuang was extremely grateful. Without hesitation, Jian Wushuang began to cultivate in the pond. By cultivating in the pond, he could absorb the primordial spiritual liquid surrounding him and turn it into spiritual power. For an ordinary warrior, it would take a considerable amount of time to absorb all the primordial spiritual liquid in the pond, but Jian Wushuang was different. Heavenly creation skill greatly defied the natural order. The first-class spirit cultivating pill he'd taken earlier contained such toxicity that it would take ordinary warriors 1 or 2 months to absorb it. However, Jian Wushuang had completely absorbed the pill in just 1 night. It was the same with the primordial spiritual liquid. As Jian Wushuang started to practice heavenly creation skill, the power of his cultivation method immediately manifested itself. An overbearing power was erupting out from his body, forcefully absorbing everything nearby. The primordial spiritual liquid in the pond was the first to be absorbed. It flooded into Jian Wushuang's pores at an amazing speed. It was like a huge black hole, consuming everything, crazy and overwhelming. How horrifying was the absorption speed! As primordial spiritual liquid flooded into his body, it was changed into spiritual power, by using the heavenly creation skill. With this process of absorption and change, the steadily increasing speed of his spiritual power could be regarded as terrifying. It is too fast. The increase of my spiritual power is too fast and terrifying. Jian Wushuang was shocked at himself. His mind was muddled, and he could not believe it. Because the speed was too frightening. In fact, all this was natural. Primordial spiritual liquid combined with heavenly creation skill, which defied the heavens, was truly overwhelming and terrifying. Just like the first-class spirit cultivating pill he'd taken before, for warriors, primordial spiritual liquid's function was much stronger than spirit cultivating pills. The pond's primordial spiritual liquid was equal to 10 first-class spirit cultivating pills. Therefore, the increasing speed of his spiritual power was naturally beyond imagination. In just half a day, Jian Wushuang found his spiritual power had reached peak of the 6th heaven of divine path. It had only taken half a day. It seemed that the pond had not reduced much in primordial spiritual liquid from this half-day of absorption. Over the next few days, Jian Wushuang focused fully on cultivating and didn't tell anyone about the terrifying improvement of his strength. Time seemed to pass slowly, yet 20 days went by in the blink of an eye. In the pond, the water level was decreasing. Jian Wushuang remained in the pond, as some primordial spiritual liquid was still flowing into his body. Finally, as the last drop of primordial spiritual liquid was absorbed, the huge pond had disappeared completely. Jian Wushuang, who had been indulging in his cultivation, suddenly opened his eyes. A terrifying flash burst out from his eyes. Chapter 18, The Breakthrough. From the bottom of the pond, Jian Wushuang stood up slowly. All his muscles and joints crackled as he rose. He stretched and took a great leap to the entrance of the cave. Jian Wushuang looked at the wall of the mountain ahead of him with his sparkling eyes. A sudden clenching of his right hand made an explosive force burst out instantly from the mountain. Bang! The tremendous sound echoed through the cave. Jian Wushuang looked at the large hole in the wall in front of him. His eyes were bright. Not only did I reach the 8th heaven of divine path, I reached the peak. Clenching his fists in excitement, he could feel the surging power contained in his hands. Jian Wushuang had spent 20 days cultivating in this cave, absorbing every drop of primordial spiritual liquid from the pond. It had contained a huge quantity of pure spiritual power, which he had absorbed completely and transformed into spiritual power. As a result, his strength had improved to an amazing state. Not long ago he had been at the 6th heaven of divine path, close to the peak. But today, a series of breakthroughs had brought him to the 7th heaven of divine path, then the 8th heaven of divine path. He had skyrocketed to the peak of the 8th heaven of divine path. It was an explosive breakthrough. But everything happened in a systematic manner. After all, not everyone had access to such a vast amount of primordial spiritual liquid to help with his cultivation, let alone heavenly creation skill, heaven-defying cultivation method. His marvelous breakthrough was attributed to the primordial spiritual liquid and the heavenly creation skill. The 8th heaven of divine path was equivalent to the initial spiritual sea realm for an ordinary warrior. One who reached the peak of the 8th heaven of divine path had the same power as one at the peak of the initial spiritual sea realm. So spiritual power operated with the strength advantage of heavenly creation skill, could be equivalent to the profound spiritual sea realm. Perhaps it was slightly lower, but not by much. A stunning light burst out from Jian Wushuang's eyes. "Jian Meng'er, I am gaining on you." Jian Wushuang roared. Jian Meng'er had cultivated to the profound spiritual sea realm. Although he had not solidified his cultivation, he had his heaven-defying heavenly creation skill, spiritual power, and so on. It meant that compared with Jian Meng'er, he was almost as strong as her. He had only needed 2 months to catch up to her. 10 days. There are still 10 days before the battle. With his eyes squinting, Jian Wushuang thought, I should take my time. I have gained battle strength similar to the profound spiritual sea realm and have a great chance of defeating Jian Meng'er in battle. However, I still need to prepare a certain trump card for myself, just in case. Thinking about a trump card, the first thing that came to his mind was the secret skill recorded in heavenly creation skill. Soul-devouring secret skill. It was an extremely powerful secret skill that defied the heavens. Along with heavenly creation skill, he was deeply impressed with this secret skill. It was impossible to forget. When Jian Wushuang thought about this secret skill, he was shocked. It was so powerful that he thought it harmed natural harmony. Furthermore, it inflicted damage on the person who exercised it. Nobody was willing to use it unless it was really an emergency. It did not make sense to use such a secret skill as the trump card. Soul-devouring secret skill contains 3 scrolls. In my present realm, I can only try the first one, at most. I can't even consider the second and third one right now. With a smile, Jian Wushuang started studying this skill. It took him a total of 5 days. 5 days later, Jian Wushuang was in the north rift of Nine Wolves Mountain, sitting cross-legged in a glade. Let's do it. He took a deep breath and started practicing soul-devouring secret skill. He spent 5 days studying. He was able to grasp the first scroll of the skill, but it had taken a considerable amount of time to carry out. He knew well the harm the skill could cause him, so he was very careful when putting it to use. He didn't dare to be sloppy. The secret skill, it devours one's soul. As he cultivated the secret skill, there was a buzzing sound. It even shocked the void. Jian Wushuang's body seemed like a giant black hole, into which there were constant peculiar forces flooding in at an amazing speed. These forces were so complex and diverse that Jian Wushuang had difficulty identifying them. But he found that with the infusion of these forces, his cultivation was booming. He had already been at the 8th heaven of divine path before, but this wild infusion of forces pushed his cultivation to a higher level. A single moment was enough to make a breakthrough from the 8th heaven. The 9th heaven of the divine path. His power continued to rise even after he reached the 9th heaven of the divine path. Suddenly, there was a sharp surge of pain in his heart. It became more intense with the rise of his cultivation. Stop it, now. Jian Wushuang was clenching his teeth. His face was distorted. Feeling the sharp pain, he stopped the operation promptly. As soon as the secret skill stopped, his increasing cultivation ceased. The pain began to weaken. Even so, the spasms in his body did not diminish right away. Lying on the glade, Jian Wushuang closed his eyes. He was gasping for breath and looked very weak. It was a long time before he opened his eyes. Soul-devouring secret skill, it really is a secret skill that devours the soul? Jian Wushuang couldn't help shaking his head. It really hurt. It was harmful to practice this skill. He had spared some effort, because he didn't push his cultivation to its full extent. However, he still felt extreme pain. If he had exercised it to the full degree, it would be more painful. The soul-devouring secret skill really causes a surge in my cultivation in a short time, but it hurts me even more, Jian Wushuang said to himself. It was one's essence, qi, and spirit, rather than their spiritual power, that the soul-devouring secret skill harmed. If it only consumed large quantities of spiritual power, he would not care at all. Heavenly creation skill, after all, helped him to recover spiritual power quickly. As for the essence, qi, and spirit, however, even heavenly creation skill could make no difference. Jian Wushuang shook his head and looked up. He wore a weird expression. It's... Jian Wushuang stared at everything around him in amazement. He realized the earth within dozens of meters around him had become lifeless. The earth, which had been dark green before, was now yellow and full of cracks. The flowers, grass, and trees were withering away. The ground with dozens of meters around him had died in the twinkling of an eye. Chapter 19, The Gathering of All Parties. With his eyes wide open, Jian Wushuang stared at his surroundings in wonder, a dozen-meter radius where the earth was a lifeless land of death. Further away from the circle the land was green and vibrant. It was at this exact moment that Jian Wushuang understood how the soul-devouring secret skill had been named. It devoured the soul. What was soul-devouring? The skill would take the soul of the earth, creatures, and nature. He understood what the strange and intricate power flowing into his body just now had been. It had been the natural power of the nearby creatures. The soul-devouring secret skill worked by taking the power of all living beings within reach and keeping them for his own use. This skill really is horrible. Unless it is absolutely necessary, I will never use it again. Jian Wushuang warned himself. After this first taste, Jian Wushuang dared not to try it again. Instead, he continued to study the detailed steps of carrying out the skill. 3 days later, Jian Wushuang was in the creek in the very middle of Nine Wolves Mountain. He cupped his hands to drink from the creek and then stood up. It is the end of the month, and I am only 2 days away from the battle. It is time to go back now. Jian Wushuang looked at the endless sky above him. He smiled and jumped up into the air, then headed in the direction of Sword Marquee Mansion. In the early morning, dawn was just breaking. In Sword Marquee Mansion, when the first blush of the rising sun from the far horizon began to light the earth, everyone fell into an uproar. The disciples and tribesmen of the mansion poured out from each building and gathered in the drill ground at the center of the Marquee's mansion. Each party and tribe of the whole Bashui commandery, as well as those from Sword Marquee Mansion, had dispatched their experts to Sword Marquee Mansion. Today, the annual Sword Marquee token battle was being held in the mansion. Actually, the so-called Sword Marquee token was only a title for the strongest person among the youth. An expert would grow up and eventually advance, so the Sword Marquee Mansion attached great importance to the cultivation of young disciples. Every year, Sword Marquee Mansion invited all the parties and tribes of the commandery to watch the battle. Under normal circumstances, an invitation from Sword Marquee Mansion, the topmost recognized power in Bashui commandery, would not be refused by any party. This year was no exception. The Sword Marquee token battle was of special significance, especially this year. It was universally acknowledged in Bashui commandery that there was a rare super genius in Sword Marquee Mansion. This super genius was only 16 and had already reached the profound spiritual sea realm. What's more, her swordsmanship was unfathomable. Such a young girl was going to take charge of the sword pavilion, which enjoyed a significant position in the mansion. Her deeds made every prominent persons in Bashui commandery full of curiosity and expectation. And this exceptional genius was of course Jian Meng'er, the god's chosen daughter in the Sword Marquee mansion. It was the perfect time for Jian Meng'er to flex her muscle in front of all the experts and to shoot for fame. After today, the sword pavilion would officially be in Jian Meng'er's charge. She would be the one crowned in the mansion. A great number of people had already swarmed into the wide drill ground. There were two platforms. One was used as the ring for disciples to show their strength, while the other one was the stands for the audience. Jian Xinhong, the current Sword Marquee mansion master, was seated in a chair, having a casual conversation with several great personages who sat by him. Since these people could sit side by side with the mansion master, one could infer that their background was not normal. Look. That must be Sidu Qingyu, the master of tribe Sidu. That's Yeshiu, the master of tribe Yet. Their family also focuses on swordsmanship. However, compared with our Sword Marquee mansion, they are far worse. It is unexpected that this Sir Bai Chong, the mysterious supervisor of the gladiator arena, would come. A lot of disciples of the mansion were carefully discussing many things around the drill ground. They fixed their eyes on the stands from time to time to have a good look at these famous experts whom they seldom saw. The Situ and Ye tribes enjoyed a little less power and position than Sword Marquee mansion, but the gap was narrow. As for the gladiator arena, it boasted great strength. In addition, the arena held an aloof position and didn't participate in the conflicts. Even the mansion master, Jian Xinhong, was wary of Bai Chong. Mr. Bai Chong, it is really a surprise that you have come to the Sword Marquee token battle personally this year. In recent years, you often sent a gold-robed servant from the gladiator arena on your behalf, said Sidu Qingyu, while wearing a smile. It is a great honor for me and the mansion, that Mr. Bai Chong has chosen to participate in this battle in person, said Jian Xinhong. This battle is much different from those before. It is normal that I should come in person. I am also curious about this exceptional genius and want to see exactly how talented she is, Bai Chong replied with a smile. Trust me, she won't let you down. Jian Xinhong said and laughed, showing his confidence in Jian Meng'er. Really? Bai Chong lifted his eyebrows. He laughed uncannily but didn't say anything more. Looking around the drill ground, he immediately noticed Jian Wushuang in a corner. He was leaning against the wall with his eyes closed. Bai Chong could not help smiling. The little boy is so calm. I wonder whether his strength has improved since the journey through Nine Wolves Mountain. Bai Chong was quite concerned for Jian Wushuang because of his friendship with Jian Nantian. He had provided Jian Wushuang with the opportunity to gain a whole pond of primordial spiritual liquid. His consideration for Jian Wushuang could be seen from what he had done. He had come mostly because of Jian Wushuang. It's almost time. Let's start, Jian Xinhong said on the platform. Jian Lan, who stood close to Jian Xinhong, nodded his head gently. Then he took a few steps and came to the very center of the platform. He cleared his throat and said, "Attention! Would all of the disciples participating in this battle, please come up." As the great elder of the Redley Martial Hall, Jian Lan was supposed to host the Sword Marquee token battle this time. There was a disturbance in the drill ground. The young disciples who had acquired their position in the battle by getting through the 5th level of the trial tower went to the center of the ground. They hustled and bustled. There were a good dozen young disciples at first sight, all of whom were geniuses in the Sword Marquee mansion, including Jian Wushuang. At the same time, a beautiful white figure was walking slowly towards them. Suddenly, everyone on the drill ground gave their full attention to her. Not only the disciples on the ground, even the personages on the platform turned their gaze to this white figure. As the god's chosen daughter in Sword Marquee mansion, disciples in the mansion adored Jian Meng'er as if she was a goddess. She was so beautiful, along with her cultivation and even her gift in sword principle. She had one great admiration. Chapter 20, Tianyuan Sword Sect. Jian Meng'er stepped forward, looking like an untouchable goddess, meant to be worshipped by the masses with her beautiful and aloof appearance. Her every move attracted the attention of those around her. Jian Meng'er, 16, profound spiritual sea realm. She had already mastered the 18 first-class sword arts of the Sword Pavilion. Based on her current speed, she'll likely reach the Gold Core realm before she turns 20. A 20-year-old, Gold Core realm expert? My God! Many disciples of Sword Marquee Mansion near the drill ground couldn't help sighing with emotion when they saw this extraordinary beauty. The realms were ranked as such, the 7 steps of the spirit path, transforming C from spiritual power, and finally, primordial gold core. The primordial gold core realm was the strongest, and there was only one gold core realm expert in Sword Marquee Mansion. He was the mansion master, Jian Wushuang. And what did a person who became an expert of the golden core realm before the age of 20 represent? Blinding strength. She's such an exceptional genius that we can't even muster the slightest motivation to compete with her. She's a peerless genius that can only be seen once in a lifetime in Sword Marquee Mansion. No wonder she has hopes of becoming the new Sword Pavilion master at such a young age. No one can hold a candle to such an exceptional genius in the entire Bashui Commandery, never mind the Sword Marquee Mansion. Even those famous experts on the grandstand were staring at Jian Meng'er with gleaming eyes. Nearly all were here for her, except for Bai Chong and a few others. The eye-catching and aloof girl made a beeline for Jian Wushuang, who stood amid the crowd. She spoke without emotion. Jian Wushuang, I heard you finally condensed your spiritual power and became a warrior. Congratulations. Turning his head, Jian Wushuang gave her a cold glance and said nothing. She wasn't angry. You've become a warrior and even achieve a breakthrough into the 6th step of the spirit path in such a short time. That's admittedly terrific. But you can't hope to close the gap in our strength in just 2 months. I advise you not to challenge me today. Don't challenge you. He sneered. This battle is unavoidable ever since you and your father started coveting the position of Sword Pavilion Master 2 months ago. Stubborn. But you've always been this way. She was still indifferent. I know you bear resentment in your heart, but there's an unbridgeable gap between us. Why must you come and seek humiliation? Seek humiliation? You really do think very highly of yourself. Have it your way. You can't blame me later when you're the one not accepting my advice. I'll show you the full extent of my strength and snip that impossibly stupid idea you have in the bud, she said coolly. I'll be looking forward to it. Jian Meng'er ended the conversation and stood casually in the center of the drill ground. Though she was surrounded by many young geniuses of the Sword Marquee Mansion, they might as well be invisible compared to her. She was like a crane standing among chickens, attracting attention with every move she made. For example, everyone had noticed the brief conversation between her and Jian Wushuang. Jian Meng'er is talking to Jian Wushuang. What is she saying? Earlier, they spoke in very quiet voices. Coupled with the noise in the drill ground, no one except the talented disciples close to them heard their conversation. They became very curious about it. I heard that Jian Wushuang made a blood oath 2 months ago to battle it out with Jian Meng'er today. I heard that too. This guy is really overreaching himself. How dare he challenge Jian Meng'er? Who among us young disciples of Sword Marquee Mansion has the right to challenge this god's chosen daughter? Jian Wushuang is just trash who condensed his spiritual power 2 months ago. How dare he? That's not exactly true. He may have condensed his spiritual power very late, but he spent only a month to break through the 6th step of the spirit path. His cultivating speed is unbelievable. So what? He's merely at the 6th step of the spirit path. A month has passed since then. Are you suggesting he has broken through the 7th step of the spirit path or the spiritual sea realm and is on par with Jian Meng'er? What a joke. That's true. All of them began looking down on him. On the drill ground, there was another person who was paying special attention to Jian Wushuang. It was Jian Lin. 1 month ago, Jian Wushuang defeated him, and badly at that. He had been harboring deep resentment since then, and today was his chance to avenge himself. He held his hands firmly together, repeating Jian Wushuang's name in his mind. The young disciples who had passed the 5th story of the trial tower gathered in the middle of the drill ground. Just as Jian Lan was getting ready to announce the start of the battle, 2 people showed up nearby. What? The famous experts on the grandstand noticed the newcomers immediately and instantly looked at them with sharp eyes. Even the languid Bai Chong couldn't help glancing at them. Primordial gold core. Not only that, the peak of the gold core realm. The famous experts were all awed. Those with primordial gold cores were definitely top-notch experts in the Bashui commandery. Everyone with the right to sit in the grandstand had all achieved that level, but most had only reached the initial gold core realm, with Jian Xinhong being stronger than most. But, although he had reached the profound gold core realm, he still had a long way to go before he would achieve the peak of the gold core realm. Among those present, there was only one who had the possibility of reaching the peak of the gold core realm. That was Bai Chong, and that was merely a possibility, not a certainty. He hardly ever fought with others, so no one knew about his true condition. Now, the leader of the 2 newcomers was evidently a peak gold core realm expert. It's her. Bai Chong was stunned, recognizing the newcomer. Sir Bai Chong, you know her? Jian Xinhong promptly asked. Yes. Bai Chong nodded. It's Shui Hangzhen, the 9th elder of the Tianyuan sword sect. She reached the peak of the gold core realm 10 years ago. Tianyuan sword sect. And an elder at that. Everyone on the grandstand was shocked. They were all famous experts in the Bashui commandery, with vast knowledge. They naturally knew about the Tianyuan sword sect. The Tianyuan sword sect was one of the 5 sects in the Tianyuan province. It was said that there were quite a few experts in that sect who had reached the yin-yang void realm, and there were even more experts in the gold core realm. In the entire Tianyuan province, the sect was doubtlessly a strong influence and a true top sect. These experts in the Bashui commandery, even the most powerful, Sword Marquis Mansion, were nothing compared to the Tianyuan sword sect. After all, their commandery was only one out of the 108 commanderies in the Tianyuan province. An elder of the sect, no matter their identity or strength, was enough to incite awe in these famous experts. They began wondering why an elder of the Tianyuan sword sect would come to Sword Marquis Mansion. Just then, Jian Lan, who was also on the grandstand, said proudly, "Don't worry, everyone. Elder Shui is here especially for my daughter." The famous experts looked stunned. In the middle of the drill ground, Jian Meng'er, who had been drawing attention all along, was already walking toward the newcomers.